Hey everyone, it's Christopher Swan, and welcome to this week's episode of Living Your Journey. Each week, I have this amazing opportunity to chat with people that love what they do in life. They understand their passions and their direction. It's kind of like they're following their North Star. They also know their story may change, but they understand that they're on their journey every day. This week, I talk with Toni Purry, longtime public relations strategist who's on a new journey after a lot of soul searching. Toni is a story that I bet many people can resonate with. Not loving your career anymore. And maybe you're not sure why, and you may be feeling depressed and anxious. That was Toni too. She wasn't happy running her PR company anymore, and she ended up losing her self-confidence along the way. After a moment of inspiration, she started on a process to help herself reflect on her past experiences and to gain her confidence back, keys to finding her next career. The really interesting thing here, Toni found something she wasn't looking for, a way to help other people reflect on their own journey and be their own cheerleader, the process she created for herself. Toni and I dive heavily into the time she felt lost, the circumstances, the depression, the clues, how things were happening, and so on, because I thought it was important to hear that not so happy time versus just the happy ending. Toni's story is about discovery, opportunities, and about feeling okay without having all of the answers. And that last part is especially why I wanted to talk to Toni. Also, I like that she's really talking about permission. Permission to make the changes you want. And I like that she's actually living it now. Everyone, meet Toni. Toni, it's so great to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be a part of this.
That's so good. And what I really love about your story is that it's not this kind of typical, look at this giant thing I built and I'm so successful, which, of course you've had successes, but I think your story is going to be a little bit different. And that's why I'm also really excited to share it.
Oh, very good. I hope it helps someone. It's been a very interesting journey. And so I enjoy the opportunity to share it.
So this personal journey, I kind of was thinking of sort of like the reinvention tour. That's what you're on. I was like, and I do think a lot of people will experience like the desire to change careers, their life, or something big. And I kind of think that's kind of where you've been. So before we get into the details of the story, I'd actually like to talk about kind of what I think of as kind of like the hardest part of these changes. The unknown, like the what's next, and possibly feeling kind of alone when you're there.
Yes.
So I kind of think that you've probably been there. You've probably been in that space when we've talked through your whole story. So I'm kind of jumping in the middle there. When going through this kind of change, is it scary or like the unknown, or did you feel like you had somebody to go to help guidance? What is that space for you?
I will say it is very, very, very scary. I have always been a pretty goal-oriented, very driven, very big dream kind of person. And to come to a place in my life where I just didn't know what was next, but I was fairly certain I didn't want to continue doing what I had been doing for over 20 years. That it was daunting. And I think for the first few months of it, tried to talk myself into thinking, you're just going through a phase, you'll be fine. Just tweak your world, tweak things how they are, find those things that you really love about what you're doing and just focus on that. But it wasn't working. And so I tried that for a long time. I'd say probably over a year of, trying to tweak it and make it work, make it fit, make the norm fit. And it was because I just didn't know what am I going to do next? This is what I know how to do. So it was a very lonely place, and it was really daunting and very scary because I didn't know how not to know what was next. I didn't know how not to have a plan or a destination for where I was going. And that was, it was overwhelming. It made me feel my confidence took a big hit. And it was pretty scary. I'd say too, I relied a lot on my family, my husband, my faith, to
Sure.
sort of, get through that. But it's no fun. It's not a fun place to be. But then you find yourself and you get your sea legs again, and you're okay. And you look back and you realize you survived it. But it is a daunting place to be.
In the middle of that too, when you kind of have this, here's how I like to describe it, because I've
Okay.
experienced some of it. I like to call it, I need to change something. What
Hmm.
am I even good at? And what the
Right.
heck am I going to do next? That kind
Exactly.
of place. When you were kind of in that space, did you have anybody that you knew that was around you that, or did you see anybody online? Because you must have looked up probably stuff, as I would imagine as well. Like, was there resources or anything out there that kind of, I guess, spoke to you or resonated that said, hey, yeah, like, you're not the only one? Because I think that's where a lot of us get into trouble, where we feel so alone about,
Right.
I want to make a change. I'm midway through my career. I want to do something different. I just don't know where. Was there anything out there that you felt like kind of did help a little bit, or that you could resonate with, or it was just more like, gosh, people are probably going through this, but I can't find them?
I think towards the end, I started to recognize that, other people were in that same space, especially many of my peers. They were at a place where they wanted to do something different. But for the first year and a half, I kind of felt like I was all by myself. And I felt like, you're crazy. Who grows a company? I, have had a PR agency. At that point, I had it for over 8 years. Who grows a company to a good size? Had about 8 employees and, a nice roster of clients. Who gets to that place and then you decide you don't want this anymore, or you don't want to do this anymore? It just seemed so counterproductive and it didn't make any sense. And it was also, PR was that thing that I could do in my sleep because I studied it in college. I've done it, in the private sector, in the public sector, and as an entrepreneur. But it was not fulfilling me anymore. But I felt personally like this was my own personal crisis and nobody else could even understand and I didn't really share it with anybody. I'll say I
Mm.
suffered in silence for a long time because I felt like there's something wrong where you have something that has worked well for you and you've decided it's not what you love anymore. And then there's that whole season of denying that I didn't love it anymore. I didn't want to even admit that because it just seemed like, yeah, what are you really? It felt like such a loser move to want to move away from what I knew was a sure thing and into a direction where I had no clue. I didn't have any ideas on what I could do that could be even more fulfilling than that once was.
Well, tell me from that point where you went to so you've been running this agency for a while. You obviously have been a long time PR strategist, and so you have all this background. You've been unhappy for a while, and maybe even tell us a little bit what the unhappiness was. Was it that you just didn't want to be through that motion, or you wanted more meaning? But what I'm really interested in is, what was the trigger for you to say, okay, I'm done, and I'm okay to move into a space I don't know, or I'm unclear, or what's next?
I always used to talk about, with my friends, how when a season is up, and I kind of we equate
Mm.
it to when you're dating somebody and there's maybe nothing major wrong in the relationship. It's just over and you're not really interested, and that person can just blink their eye and it drives you bananas,
Oh gosh, I shouldn't
or
laugh at that. Makes me sound like
I
I know
know.
it.
But you get to that place and you're like, they didn't even do anything wrong and I'm really annoyed,
Mm.
And that's how I was starting to feel about my company. I felt that I was starting to be annoyed by my clients. I was
Mm.
annoyed by my employees. I was annoyed by challenges that came up that I used to very easily take them on. And we're going to get this taken care of. We're going to figure this out. And simple things that I would, take on with a sense of vigor and enthusiasm, I was just annoyed by them. So I knew the season had changed. And many of these were the same clients that I'd had for a long time. There may have been some changes in administration or things like that where their culture changed a little bit. But I'd been through changes like that before and was able to successfully meld into the new environment. But all of those things started to really unnerve me and just, cause me a lot of anxiety and stress. So that was one of the telltale signs. And then I would say where a pivotal point for me was when I stopped and noticed that I would get a lot of requests for proposals, and I would turn proposals around in, 2 or 3 days, and really excited about it with a lot of creative ideas and things of what we could do for that potential client. And then there came a point where I realized it was taking me about a week to turn those things around. And I just, it felt more like labor than a labor of love. And I wasn't as excited about new business opportunities. And then I also wasn't doing those things that you put in place ahead of time to ensure that your clients were renewing their accounts. And there was just no desire for me to feed the business anymore.
Sure.
It was all very subconscious. But, then you look back after you get to a place and you say, all right, what's wrong here? And you realize a big part of it was I felt like this company's not giving me any love, but I also realized I wasn't putting any love into it. There was nothing for it to reciprocate. And that was kind of my aha moment.
Was it a big enough aha to pause you to say, I need to change this? Because I think that's where maybe I'll own this a little bit. I'll say sometimes I get to a point where I'm like, I probably should do this, but fear gets in the way of me actually making the change, and it may take me a while to actually do it then. Was that, so yeah, I guess the question is really around the aha. Were you like, okay, I don't know what the plan is, but I can't do this?
Yeah, that was a realization. Now, it wasn't a big aha and I've got to change it. It was, okay, now what do you do with this information? Because there isn't anything out there that's exciting you to compete with the level of excitement that I had known for many years, being a PR strategist, and especially as an entrepreneur running an agency. So I came to this awareness and then went through this whole, okay, well, now what? And that lasted for a long time. And I will tell you quite honestly, that is that caused my confidence to take a hit like nobody's business. And I've always been a pretty driven, pretty self-motivated, go-get-em kind of person, big dreamer, believe in the possibilities and all of that. And all of that it felt like it was broken in me. And my confidence took such a hit. Somebody who really had never struggled with confidence, in that I just always felt like I was kind of an internal optimist. My dreamer was broken. My vision was broken. My inspiration, all of that was just out of order. I mean, the light, the sign was off.
Did you even at that time when confidence, like if I could translate that a little bit even further, or maybe add pieces to that, did that coincide? Like, I mean, were you feeling depressed? Was there like anxiety,
Yes.
all of that? Because I kind of think about confidence is one piece of it, but the pieces that go with it also are like, I would struggle with stuff because I've been in some of this place as well. That's why I kind of speak to that. But I'm curious if that was like the reality of your space, not just, oh, maybe I can't do this, but it's also anxiety is a real thing or depression's a real thing.
All of those became a reality for me. I'd never really been one to deal with depression. And I've dealt with that with family members, so I know what it looks like. But it had impacted me. And I think it's that thing where everything is broken, and depression for me didn't look like what I was familiar with. I wasn't really lethargic. I wasn't I just wasn't motivated about anything. The normal things that I was able to, that I used to draw inspiration from, they weren't doing it, for me. And I was one that could draw inspiration from many, many, many different places. So it was. And I remember going to my doctor saying, I think I'm suffering from depression, and she didn't feel that it was that serious, but it was. I felt like I was in somebody else's skin. That's what I'd say. I'd tell my friends, I feel like I'm in somebody else's body because this isn't me, and nothing's working. And I had come to that place too, that resolve where I was like, well, maybe this is it. You've had a really good run. You've had a lot of great opportunities. You've been able to do a lot of amazing things. And maybe at my age, my 40 something age, this was, my new reality.
Oh.
I know, resigning at that age. And it did. There was a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of fear and a tremendous amount of uncertainty. Decisions that I was able to make with clarity at one point, I now became very nervous about making decisions. What if it's the wrong decision? What if this happens? What if this? I mean, there's this ripple effect.
Let's jump forward a little bit too. So, because I'm sure our listeners are like, gosh, this is a depressing conversation.
I know.
Here's the light. There is light. There's light. You went from this low confidence. You're kind of in this kind of, and this is why I wanted to start there in the middle initially too, because I think that was such a big, important part here that so many people go through. And we always talk about the positive and the inspirational things on so many shows and in books, and that's so great. I was just telling this to somebody yesterday, but it's a little shallow. Like, you gotta talk about the rough stuff, because that's where stuff gets real to me.
Right.
It's you turn through that. So, okay, so I want to tell your story, but I know that was from, and I'm not going to use the right words because I want you to frame it, but you went from this low confidence kind of to this idea, vision board-esque journey, and I mean, of course it goes forward. But tell me about like the turn for you and what the actual experience was.
My big aha moment where there was this big turn was my husband was watching Muhammad Ali on TV. He's just fascinated with him. And it was around the time, I'm not sure if it was before or after he passed, but it was a documentary. And I remember walking through the room being captivated at his confidence and thinking, how did he have confidence even in defeat, even when things didn't look good for him, even when he had Parkinson's disease, he still exuded all of this confidence. So a few minutes later, I am watching a clip where his corner man, his manager, Boondini Brown, is standing face to face with him right before he's going to go on a fight and reminding him of all of his victories and reminding him of, that he's the greatest. And my thought was, wow, if we all had, a hype man reminding us of our victories, we'd all walk around with that kind of confidence. So I thought, I need to create a hype book for myself. I need to remind myself of my successes. So I pulled a journal off my shelf and I cut out a bunch of pictures of successful things that I'd done, things that were successful to me over the years, starting my company, doing the LA Marathon, nonprofit work that I'd done, and just started journaling in great detail about those things. And I tell you what, 2 days sitting in my living room floor doing that, and 20 pages in, there was this ascension of confidence that rose up in me that really just pivoted where I was. And it made me super excited about what was ahead, even though I still didn't know what it was, because I'm now looking back on this history of success and accomplishments as my jumping off point. And it just became this big thing for me. And the joy that I had in journaling in very detail, writing about the process, it was a phenomenal thing. And that was sort of the aha moment for me to cross the threshold of, okay, you're not running the agency anymore. Now what? And not even really knowing what that now what was, but I was enjoying this, window that I was sitting in and what it was doing for me on a confidence level, internally, emotionally, mentally, physically. It stirred up a new excitement in me that I hadn't known in a very, very long time.
When you got that idea to come up with this hype idea, or like the journal, and that's kind of what I
Yeah.
mean to when I refer to that as the book, but when you went through that process, here's what I want you to connect for me. How did you go from this hype man, this guy that's like helping to uplift, somebody to I should journal? Because I don't think for me, I would know right away to even think about maybe that. Like, what was the connection for you to like, or what was your meaning to do that? Was it to actually lift yourself up, or was it just to take a look? Like, what were you seeking when you were doing that exercise?
Part of that, struggle with my confidence was in how I was perceiving myself. There had to be something wrong with me that I'd want to walk away from a thriving agency. We had challenges, and because I wasn't putting love into it, towards the end, I probably ran into way more challenges and frustrations than I would have. But I was in a pretty beat up place. And I think just as human beings, we tend to do that. 10 people can give you a compliment about something, but that one other person will say, I wasn't impressed. And you obsess over that. And I was doing all of that to myself. So I needed to find a way to shift my perception or my focus about myself. So that is where I was. And there was this hunger or this need to see myself through a different lens, because I was feeling pretty much like a failure in that I would not have a plan for going forward, but know that I didn't want to do what I was doing in the past, because I've always been a person with a plan. As a PR strategist, you're even trained to think like that. You know the destination, you know where you want to go.
I'd even take that a step further, Toni. I think like even many of us, grow up with that's kind of the thing we learn. Like you have to have a plan. Here's the jobs you can have. And I think it's a little bit different for a generation that's younger, because I think the avenues of career goals and different things have changed from,
Right.
And I think you and I are probably about the same age around. And growing up, I remember thinking like, okay, these are the roles. You keep a long-term job, versus like, oh, I'm going to have 20 jobs in my career. Like, who matters?
Right.
So I almost look at this a little bit like, it's not just as a PR person, which is very true, but it's also like you had to almost change the way that you were thinking completely.
Exactly.
And be okay with that.
Yeah.
Well, tell me more about how you went from this now exercise of, kind of mapping out all the things that you did in detail and this new lens to like, then what was next? Like you do this, you see yourself in a new way, which by the way, I love, because I think you went into it almost trying to answer a problem, and you came up with like, instead of that, or in addition to it, you came up with another option. So tell me about that space, because I think that's really fun.
A friend texted me and asked, "What are you doing?" And I told her what I was doing, and she said, "I'm making myself a hype book." She said, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, it's when you journal about your accomplishments and your achievements, however they are, whenever they happened." And we went back and forth, and she said, "Everybody needs one of these." I said, "I know everybody needs one. You have to do it for yourself." She said, "No, Toni, everybody needs one, and you need to create it for everyone." And in that moment, there was this light bulb went off. And I started on this journey of writing this process down so that it could be used by other people as well. And even that became this incredible healing process for me, because I'm now writing, and which I love doing, and have done that all my career, and writing from a place of being informed as I was walking through the process on my own. So it was really kind of an extraordinary turn of events that were very unplanned, but quite organic. And it's come together, in the most amazing way.
You were on this journey to figure some stuff out. It was really a self-discovery that you thought was a confidence builder plan, but it was, but it was also this self-discovery because it turned into, look at this cool thing that I actually did for myself and now I can share it with others. So I think that's what I was like, it's almost like the epitome of self-discovery. You discovered something you didn't even know you were looking for.
Right.
And so that's why I think it's actually very cool about it. And I know we talked about this a few weeks ago, and I was so kind of jazzed by that because it wasn't that you just, look, I have this new book I'm going to publish and sell and whatever. Because as most people know that talk to me, whenever anybody suggests that they want to talk about a new book they have on my show, I roll my eyes. And everybody hears that from me. I'm like, oh, yeah, good luck with that. But, and because it's usually just like, it feels gimmicky to me. And I thought what was really interesting about this was you went through this process that's so genuine, Toni. Like it's like you were just lost and you were just working it out. So anyways, let me turn it back to you and say, tell me more about like, what is it that you've actually produced? Tell me more about this actually journal and this book that has come out of this process, because I think it's great.
I'm so over the moon excited about it. And I am because it wasn't my strategy. It wasn't my plan. It was a very, very, very organic process that worked. And so, but I will say when I started the idea to write a book around it, I didn't plan for it to turn out to be as comprehensive as it is. It took me 9 months. And the reason it took that amount of time is because I didn't know where it was going. I was just, as more ideas would come to me, as I was inspired in different areas, I then became very voracious about my hunger to learn about confidence and learn about journaling and learn about the whole process of self-discovery and all of those things. And that certainly helped me. But it is a guided motivational journal that takes you through the journey of really processing your good and your achievements and looking at yourself through your success lens. It's a book that basically becomes, in the end, when you look at the whole scheme of it, is your success narrative. It's what are those things that you did that you feel really proud of, and why do they make you feel proud of? It's a very private process. I mean, I guess you could let somebody else read it, but I think it's really for you as an individual. And the journal is divided into 6 categories so that you can be really specific about how you're writing. And you can also go back to those things and be fed by those as you review. But the categories are major milestones, significant victories, health and wellness achievements, good and charitable deeds, life adventures, and lessons learned. And I included lessons learned because everything doesn't always go great. And, life happens and it's not always fun. But instead of measuring ourselves or sizing ourselves up by that setback, why don't we extrapolate what we are all the wiser as a result of? What do we know more about ourselves, about life in general? And list that. And then that becomes a victory because you know more about yourself and everything around that because you now are looking at that from a different perspective. And you're far enough away from it to look at it, from a different perspective. So the book in general helps you to recognize what your achievements are, to really pay attention to those, to reflect on them, and then to celebrate them, because I think we have to find ways to commemorate our good deeds and good activities, because that then helps them remember them more than we make a moment out of it.
And I think that it's just kind of amazing to pull those ideas together into this book. I mean, it's obviously been a great process for you, because it's been a catalyst for something new. And tell me about this. I think you said to me a while ago that it was going to come out in spring, like maybe April or so, because it's not quite out yet. You're
It's
pulling,
not quite out
yeah.
yet.
So what's the target for when you're about to release it?
It will actually be out at the beginning of May, and I'm doing something a little different, and this also speaks to the new phase that I'm in. So the old Toni would have said, okay, this has got to go. I got to find a literary agent, and this has got to be in every bookstore, and the whole traditional route. I've got to get it in every bookshelf. Well, what I decided to do this time, and I know this is totally indicative of this new season that I am in, is I'm launching it on Kickstarter because I want to test the market. There's that thought, maybe this was just a process to help me get to this new place, writing and authoring. But I feel like it's a tool that can be of service to a lot of people, no matter where you are, whether you're in a funk or whether you're on a mountaintop right now. I think it's really vital that we all get in the practice of looking at our good and processing our good to the same extent, if not more, than when we process the challenges that we face, and then also celebrating our achievements and our victories. So I will be launching a Kickstarter campaign in April, in the beginning of April, and a crowdfunding campaign. And so it'll be available for pre-order, and then we will actually be shipping the book out in May. And so I'm very excited. I'm also even very excited about doing it that way because it's just so different than the way I, would normally think to do things. But again, I think it's part of this new journey of not knowing exactly where this is going and being okay with that.
And I'm so glad you said that because I was going to ask you about that because, for anybody who's listening to this, it's not about your story's not about this book. Like your story that you're telling us today is really around this. I'm just doing new things. I'm trying new things and I'm okay with it. I've changed my thinking. Like you have new permission and new confidence. Now the book is a really cool thing. And it's a great tool and hopefully that helps others. But it's this, hey, it's okay if you're in this place. That's what I kind of take out of this from your story, Toni. And even thinking about that, about people maybe being in that space or maybe living the same sort of experiences you have of like feeling like they're out of love with something and they want to do something new. What would you tell to people? Like what should people not lose sight of when they're in that kind of freak out moment?
I would say just don't lose faith. That's the thing is don't lose faith in yourself. Don't lose faith in the promise of tomorrow. Don't lose faith in that, it's okay for things to change. It's really, really okay. And it's okay to not know what's next.
Where's the best place to not only find about the book, maybe follow along with you and your story that people can do online or where else can they find you?
So our website is the title of the book, myhypebook.com. And that's myhypebook.com. And you can go there and find out about the book. You can also sign up for our email list. And then we're live on social media on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. So we're actually going to be starting to talk about more of the journey now that we are getting so close to the launch, and I'm finished with all of the writing portion of the book. But it's very excited. But yes, myhypebook.com will bring you into our world, and also finding us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter will be definite ways for hopefully for us to encourage you and to be an encouragement to somebody else and to find that being okay in that place of uncertainty, or tools that help you build and maintain and nurture your confidence.
That's perfect. Well, and we'll share all that information on the show notes and on our website. Well, Toni,
Awesome.
Thanks for sharing all of this. And I can't wait to actually look through your book just because I know that we've talked about it a couple times. And actually, It's interesting too, because I feel like I'm in a really good space with what I'm doing, but I'm just really curious to see how you like bucketed things. So anyways, I could go on about this, but thank you so much for being on the show and talking about it and your story.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast. I really
good.
appreciate it. I'm such a fan of your show, so this was
sweet.
quite the honor.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the show this week. What'd you think? Great story? Any new ideas? If you're new to the show, subscribe to receive a new episode each week automatically. And if you love the show and you want to help us out, go tell a friend about it. Then go write us a quick review on iTunes. Both of these favors really help us get the word out. If you want to follow along with me and see behind the scenes fun and more, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at @MeChristopher. That's MECHRISTOPHER. To get even more inspiration and updates, follow Accidental Information on Instagram and Facebook at Accidental Information, and on Twitter at Accidental Info. We also post original articles about following your passions and getting creative, and more information about each episode at accidentalinformation.com. Thanks for joining me this week. Now let's keep chatting online, and then I will talk to you again next week.